Welcome to Class 3 of Beginning Meditation. If you haven't taken Classes 1 and 2, please do so before taking this class. In a minute, we'll do a guided meditation. In the first class, we brought our awareness to the breath. In the second class, we expanded our awareness to include bodily sensations. In this class, we'll expand our awareness even further to include emotions. First, I'll briefly discuss some approaches to our experience. I talk about them in the context of emotions, but they apply to all the objects of our awareness. One thing you can try is recognizing or identifying the emotion. You might want to name it. If it's helpful, you can try mental noting. In the first class, we touched upon the notion of acceptance. Emotions can be painful. They can be hard to hold. They can be hard to be with. Rather than react to the emotion, accept it without wanting it to be anything other than it is. An important part of the practice is investigation. It's one of the 7 factors of enlightenment. Try to understand the nature of the emotion. Emotions have a mental component, and they often have a physical manifestation. Investigate the nature of the emotion. So take a few seconds to get situated. Let's sit. As before, bring your awareness to the breath, and if a bodily sensation arises, to the bodily sensation. With your awareness on the breath or on a bodily sensation, you may notice that your attention is drawn to an emotion. When that happens, bring your awareness to that emotion. Try to recognize the emotion. You may want to name it. If it's helpful, try mental noting. Anxiety, irritation. Investigate the nature of the emotion. How does it feel? Is the mind tight or agitated? Is the body tense or warm? Try not to react to the emotion. Accept the emotion as it is, without wanting it to be anything else. Keep your awareness on the emotion until it disappears. When that happens, bring your awareness back to the breath. You may notice that the emotion disappears as soon as you bring your awareness to it. When that happens, bring your awareness back to the breath. With your awareness on an emotion, you may notice that your attention is drawn to another emotion. When that happens, keep your awareness on whichever emotion is predominant. At any time, if you notice your awareness is not with an emotion, is not with a bodily sensation, and is not with the breath, bring your awareness back to the breath. As promised, today's Dhamma talk is on the path leading to the end of suffering, the Noble Eightfold Path. Let's review the Four Noble Truths. The first noble truth is the truth of suffering. The second noble truth is the truth of the cause of suffering. The third noble truth is the truth of the end or cessation of suffering. The fourth noble truth is a path leading to the end of suffering, the Noble Eightfold Path. The Eightfold Path consists of path factors. And our job as meditators is to cultivate these path factors and cultivate them until they are perfected. Now, each of the path factors begins with the word right, which also means correct. You can also think of it as wise or skillful. The 8 path factors are right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. So it's one way of looking at these factors is to group them into what are called the 3 trainings. The practice consists of 3 trainings: morality, concentration, and wisdom. Morality is the foundation of the other 2 trainings. So let's start with that. The first path factor within morality is right speech. There are 4 elements to right speech. One is to abstain from lying, from malicious speech, from harsh speech, and from idle chatter. Now, lying is construed broadly. It includes misleading, and it also includes white lies. Many people don't even think of white lies as lies. They're condoned by society, at times encouraged. But white lies are inconsistent with right speech. Malicious speech is self-explanatory. Harsh speech is when we're confrontational or argumentative or angry. Right speech involves communicating gently. Idle chatter has a different meaning for monks and for lay people. For monks, it pretty much means not talking about anything other than the Dhamma. For lay people, I interpret it basically as not gossiping. Gossiping, I consider to be talking about someone when they're not present. Now, there are times where it's healthy to do this, if you're a teacher talking to another teacher about a student. But generally, when you're talking about other people, it's gossip, idle chatter, and not consistent with right speech. Right action also is different for monks than for lay people. Monks have a set of 227 rules they have to follow. Nuns have 311 rules. To violate any of those rules is inconsistent with right action. For lay people, there's something, our moral code is called the 5 precepts. Now, technically, right action is only the first 3, but since they're so important, I'll talk about all 5 precepts. The first precept is to abstain from harming another being. That includes killing, and it's also understood that it includes animals. Now, when I first started meditating and saw this, I naturally assumed it meant being vegetarian. I found out later that many meditators interpret it differently. And I could give a whole Dhamma talk on this subject. Instead, I'll refer you to a film, Animals and the Buddha, that you can view on YouTube. The second precept is to abstain from taking what is not given. In other words, don't steal. Now again, this is construed broadly. When I first started meditating, shortly after that, I needed a word processing program. I decided on Word. And I found out in order to purchase Word, you have to buy all these other programs. I didn't have a lot of money at the time. It was a real dilemma. I ended up buying a bootleg program. The same dilemma arose just a few years ago, where I needed to buy Word again. And this time, I decided that if I bought something bootleg, it would violate this precept, so I paid for it. The third precept is to abstain from sexual misconduct. For a monk, this means celibacy. For lay people, I interpret this to mean don't harm anyone through sexual activity. The fourth precept is to abstain from false speech, and it's similar to what we talked about with right speech. The fifth precept is no intoxicants, and this includes alcohol. Intoxicants dull the mind. They inhibit mindfulness. When I first started meditating, I had beer occasionally and smoked pot occasionally. I almost immediately gave up beer. Pot was a little harder, but within a couple of years, I also gave up pot. So this is the moral code for lay people. And if you're going to become a serious practitioner, I strongly encourage you to abide by these 5 precepts. I abide by them diligently. The next path factor is right livelihood, and it means abstaining from 5 different trades. They are trade in weapons, humans, animals, intoxicants, or poisons. In the concentration training, the first path factor is right effort. It has a technical meaning, but I'll talk about some broad concepts. The Buddha described 4 types of learners. There's the fast learner, where progress is pleasant. The fast learner, where progress is painful. The slow learner, where progress is pleasant. And the slow learner, where progress is painful. Now, if you're lucky, you're a quick learner and progress is pleasant. If you're like me, it's not. There are days where it takes a giant effort just to get to the cushion. Another aspect of effort is diligence, getting to the cushion. At the beginning of the course, I asked you to try and meditate every day. And for many people, it's very hard. I would note that often the hardest part about it is actually getting to the cushion. There's a story I'll tell, and let me talk generally. In this course, we're going over a lot. It's almost impossible to absorb. What happens if you stick with it, over time you'll start hearing the same concepts again. And at one point, they may really click, and they may very well be applicable to what you're going through at the time. So in this story, there's a monk named Sona, and he's working very, very hard, but his practice is not progressing. The Buddha sees this, and he goes to him, and he knows that Sona had been a lute player as a layperson. So he asked Sona, "Sona, what would happen if one of your strings was too tight?" Sona answered, "It wouldn't sound right." "And what if one of your strings was too loose?" "It wouldn't sound right." In the same way, the Buddha said, you don't want too much effort, and you don't want too little effort. You want to find the balance in your effort. The next path factor within concentration is right mindfulness, and we talked about that in the first class. The next path factor is right concentration, and again, that has a technical meaning. It refers to states of absorption called jhanas. I would just say generally, developing concentration is challenging. It takes time. I encourage you to have patience and certainly not to judge yourself. In the wisdom training, there's right view, and it's sometimes translated as right understanding. And it means understanding the Four Noble Truths, but not just on an intellectual level. The Four Noble Truths are not that difficult to understand intellectually, but we want to be able to understand them experientially. The last path factor is right intention, which is also sometimes translated as right thought. And it refers to the intention of renunciation, of non-ill will, and of non-cruelty. So let me give you some homework. Sometime during the upcoming week, you may experience a particularly strong emotion. When you do, make a strong effort to not react, to simply be with the emotion, observe it, watch it as it passes, and when it's done, review the experience. The second homework is to pick one day where you don't talk about anyone who is not present. You'll be surprised at just how much we do this. That ends class 3. Congratulations on making it this far. You're doing well, and keep up the good work.